So this time last year, Arcane dropped its second and final season, a season that following its very expensive first, reportedly amounted to over $200 million in total to make, making it one of the most expensive TV shows of all time and potentially the most expensive animated TV show ever made. However, even after all of this and the established fanbase that League of Legends already had, in the end, Arcane by many of its creators and showrunners was considered an absolute failure. Not because it did bad numbers or the show itself was considered hard to watch. No, they considered it a failure because after spending that much money on it, the show itself didn't deliver much in the expansion of their already established player base, meaning that they'd never really make back the money that they sunk into it, which I guess also gives it yet another incredible title, of it now being Riot Games' biggest financial failure of all time. But now aside from its failure to generate profit for the company, how did the show itself actually perform, and was it truly an absolute failure all around, or is it still the absolute masterpiece that we once all claimed it to be? Well, to understand this and to truly make a lasting judgment on it, we first have to go back to Season 1 and discuss why that season seemed to work so well and why as a follow-up, Season 2 seemed to lack in almost every way. So Season 1 and the entirety of its story itself, at the end of the day, was a sad story of two sisters and nothing more. Sure, there was war themes, rebellion, monsters, magic and betrayal all seen scattered throughout it, but at the end of the day, and at its core, it was simply about these two girls and the changes that they would go through throughout the progression of the story. It was about their feud, their growth, their trauma, their identities. Simply, it was all about them. And that was the gold. The lightning in the bottle that made the miracle that was Season 1's direction and story so profound and captivating for us, the audience. It was something that Season 2 just really didn't have at all. Sure, again, they tried to do something around the Jace and Victor connection and bond. However, unlike Season 1's sisterhood story, this story felt unclear and jumbled up in a giant ball of confusion and time travel. It felt directionless for most of the story and a lot more forced than its counterpart of Season 1. And along with this, it also didn't have that spark of relatability that Season 1 already had, because each of us could relate to something in Season 1. Whether that be the sibling bond between Fi and Powder, the parental sacrifice and connection between Fi and Vander, the changes that these girls went through after all of their losses, or the relationships and traumas that they managed to develop along the way. There was always something that I, and likely many of you, could connect back to and understand on a deeper, more personal level. It, and I'm referring only to Season 1 here, felt like a truly life-changing story where watching it didn't just feel entertaining and fun, but almost like a rite of passage where you could pick up and learn something deeper about yourself by doing so. Because it had a character, a lesson, and an individual storyline for each of us to follow and again, relate to in our own personal ways. Season 2, on the other hand, just simply had none of this. But now to just step away from the deep nuance of Season 1 for a second here, something else that just has to be noted when discussing Season 1's success before going further into this video was the production that it had, and how it quite literally went beyond anything that we had seen up to that point. It was, for a lack of a better word, revolutionary in the entertainment and animation space. And in all honesty, I still struggle to this day to put anything above it when talking about the best of the best in animated entertainment. It was just that good of a show. And then to also pair this level of quality animation with both the amazing soundtrack that it had and the gritty and stunning sound design that it used in almost every scene, the show itself simply transformed from something normal to something truly masterful. Like, it was literally so good that my limited vocabulary at this moment in time is struggling to find the right words to describe it. I just find myself continuously returning to words like perfection and excellence because nothing else seems to fit this season so well. But now this isn't me saying that Arcane was just insane because it had an insanely high budget. Because as Season 2 showed us, with its even higher budget than Season 1, all of the money in the world doesn't make a bad story into a good one. It takes an okay story and team to use that budget to make a good story into a great one. Which of course now circles us around to the story of Arcane itself once again. A story that didn't follow a normal path, and one where depending on the scene or moment that you use, you could argue any of the characters in the cast as being the bad guy or the bad girl in that moment. Because the story, like life itself, was never black and white, and we through the eyes of the characters themselves see how the world shapes them into who they become. We saw how Powder became Jinx out of anger and pain. We saw how Jace, the man of progress, became the world's undoing. We saw how Caitlyn goes from a naive and hopeful girl into an evil monarch who'll do anything to get her revenge. And of course, who can forget how the most honourable man in the entire show got forcefully changed by the world around him into the most evil monster the world had ever seen. Each of these characters, given the act that you use, could also be called the world's greatest villain. However, you would also struggle to claim any of them as unjustified in what they did or what they became, which I personally think was an aspect of both Season 1 and Season 2 stories that was truly realistic and profound. No character was evil for the sake of being evil. Not even Smeech. He was just a selfish businessman who was out for his own ends. Nothing more. This character progression and story direction was genius in my opinion, and something that deserves to be explored in much more detail in the future at some point. However, for now, to avoid going deeper into this rabbit hole of what makes Arcane so goddamn good, I want to just get back on topic and discuss what about Season 2 went wrong, and what about it failed to do what Season 1 seemed to do so easily. So of course, like we hinted at before, Season 2's story for most of its entirety felt directionless and confusing. Almost as if you are watching a different show altogether from its very first season. Which for a season that was predominantly designed around its story rather than its characters wasn't really a good thing. For see, Season 1 was all about the development of its cast, the growth and understanding of who they are. Season 2, on the other hand, was supposed to be more direct and to the point, with the story itself taking the lead and the characters themselves taking a back seat. Now, for a show like Arcane, where the characters were a major reason we all watched, this was always going to be an issue for many, no matter how they handled it. However, pair this issue with the story and the ending that very few actually enjoyed in the end, and you have what we of course got, which was a show that many lost all respect and love for. Now, does this mean Season 2 itself was bad or unwatchable in any way? Or does it also make Season 1's success null and void? Well, honestly, to me, I'd say most definitely not. And I think when watching both seasons, you almost have to treat them as different shows altogether. Because at Season 2's moment in time, the characters and the world around us is completely different. It is a different story, and the people in it are completely different from the ones that we saw in Episode 1. Because not every person is the same as they used to be when they were young and naive and hopeful about the future. They change, they adapt, and they don't always do that for the better. Of course, when just talking about a sequel series itself, not every sequel would ever reach the heights of its first. And not every sequel will be as good or as emotionally gripping as its first. But that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable or fun to watch. It just means it's different, and they themselves are different. Which, if you are a true fan of Arcane, then you also know difference isn't always a bad thing, and quite often will make you, or in this instance, what you are watching, all the more interesting and amazing. Because at the end of the day, for all its confusion, Arcane Season 2 was still a masterpiece in almost every way. It just wasn't Season 1. But now again, I can continue to go in circles here and point out how this scene from Season 1 beats all of Season 2, or how this Isha moment alone surpasses 90% of Season 1's entertainment for me personally. But that at the end of the day wouldn't really get us anywhere and wouldn't really change your perspective on the show at all. So instead of doing all of that, I want to just end off by asking all of you what your opinion on Season 2 actually was. And is Arcane still the masterpiece that we once considered it to be, or did Season 2 change your outlook on the show entirely? Tell me all of that down below in the comments, and consider hitting that subscribe button while you are also there. But for now, and with all of that said, I do hope you all have a great day or night wherever you are, and peace.